Okay, so we've got a pretty good version of our walk going, and now I want to go through the details to make it really pretty, and kind of tie up all the loose ends, do all the final finishing stuff for it to make it good and solid and ready to show. So here's a play blast of it in its current condition. Now, it's a pretty good walk, but if you look, you'll notice that it still has a few problems that need to be addressed. There's there's some problems in the knees. What they've got going on is really one of the most classic problems with walk cycles, which is the knee pop. Oftentimes, when you do a walk cycle and you make your front leg, your contact leg, be straight on the point of contact, then what happens often is as that foot starts to kick back, you get a little more kick up of the knee. Now, if we look at our play blast, we'll notice it's less of a problem with the left knee than with the right knee. And I think that that has to do with the fact that the right knee is what's coming down over the point where the curve cycles again. So to address this, let's just take a look at what's happening with the right foot as it comes through that cycle. Okay, now you'll notice these curves here are interpolating kind of funnily because, once again, they don't have their tangents fixed to make a nice smooth curve going through. So when we look at this play blast, if we decide that what's happening with the left knee is what we want, then we have sort of a template for how we want to address fixing these tangents to make it symmetrical with the left knee. I'm not really crazy about that left knee. It's alright. It's certainly not popping nearly as much, but I think it could maybe be a little better. So let's just take a look at what's happening with that left knee as it interpolates through its step. So it comes down, has a nice straight leg on a contact, and then follows through on its walk. Now, if we go in really close, what we'll notice is that one of the problems I think with the walk is that the foot is taking a long time to actually fully hit the ground. He lands with his heel on frame 17, then there's frame 18, 19, 20, and 21. So that's a full 4 frames before that foot hits the ground. And so what it does is, since it takes 4 frames to hit the ground, it doesn't really feel like there's a lot of weight in that foot. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is let's take care of that. Now, since this is a case of rotate X, if we take a look at rotate X coming off of 17, we can see here is where it's at 17 is where it's up, and at 21 is where it finally rotates all the way down to the ground. So that's our 4 frames. So one thing we could maybe do, we could treat this a couple ways. We could always just move this forward to, say, frame 19 if we wanted to. I'm going to undo that and shift. We can move it over, so then that way we know it stays right at 0. So now what we're going to get, if we go Alt left arrow to scroll through frame by frame, we're going to get the foot lands, there's the foot's contact point where its heel's up, and then 2 frames and it's already down. Now that may be a little too fast, and you'll see too when that foot comes all the way down, it really stretches out that leg. The way rotate X affects the leg is it doesn't just rotate that foot, but as that foot rotates, you see it pulls that ankle out. So it may be that makes that pose look a little bit unnatural. So I think what we want to do then is mess a little bit with Translate Z and bring it in just a hair so that that pose looks a little more natural. And again, I can just pull this key over, which essentially lowers that line and brings the Z back. That's a little too much. So what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm just going to set a key here and just on Translate Z, since now we've sort of got our surgeon's knife out and we're really going into detail about making this nice and fine. We only want to key just what we're fixing. So I'll key Translate Z. There's our key right there. And I'm just going to shift, bring it down just a little bit until it's sitting right about where it feels like it's a little more natural. So now when we scroll through it, we see something kind of like that. Okay, so that feels a little better, at least with how it's going to step. And we'll play blast this in a minute, but let's fix a few other things. Again, if we look at our current play blast, and again we're looking at his left foot, we see that it's got a little bit of a hiccup when it comes up off the ground here. Okay, it's not too smooth, and that sort of thing put on a demo reel will pretty much get the demo reel thrown into the trash instantly. It shows that you can't do quality control and that you don't finish up your animation. So even if you've got a really nice walk cycle going, if you have little hiccups like that in your animation, reel review boards will see it instantly and mock you relentlessly and then throw away your reel. So let's fix that problem. Again, this is where the left foot comes up off the ground is the point where it cycles. And so the reason we're getting that little hiccup, we can see if we highlight everything in the left foot, we can see what's sort of giving us a little bit of problem. It's that little tangent there. It's not as smooth as it could be. So we'll start with now we can open up our time range a little bit more, so we can roll through it like this. So if we see on translate Y, it goes all the way back and then immediately starts coming back, and that's sort of what makes it unsmooth. So why don't we flatten this tangent like this, and then go back to this other end and flatten this one. So now we can see that interpolation there's a little smoother. Now we can smooth out the rotate X like that, so it looks a little smoother. And then the last thing we want to do is fix this translate Y. So I think maybe we can just flatten that one like so. So now when we roll through this, what we see is that it's a little smoother. It's still got some problems. Let's look at it on the plane here so we can really see what's going on. Okay, so if we go up here to frame 31, translate Y is where it's going in. It's where it's going vertically. Okay, so already it's starting to come a little bit up off the ground, and let's try to figure out why that is. Okay, now when we look at why this foot's coming off a little bit, another thing we notice about rotate X is when we click it and middle mouse drag is that will affect where the toe comes down on the ground. And so since it's a little high, what we notice is that when we lower it, that raises that key right there. So raising the key on the graph will lower the foot in the shot itself. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pick this one key, rotate X, and raise it up just until we feel like it's just touching the ground like that. Okay, so now when we see that foot roll through like this, it feels a little bit better, but now up here it's dropped down low again, and so it needs to go up a little bit higher to get that toe down on the ground. And now what we want to do when we're messing with keys like this, you can always set another key right here and raise it, but it's always great to try to do things with as few keys as possible so your curve stays simple and elegant. So now in this case what we can do is we can grab this key, mess with this tangent, and if we raise it, that's going to raise that curve through frame 31. So now we've achieved the same goal without needing to set another key. Okay, so now when we roll through it, now it starts to look a little bit smoother as it's going through. Okay? So now at frame 34 we'll see that foot has just crashed through the ground, and we can see that that's because of we're cycling back to frame 1 and there's that upturn in the line there. So now if we just go back to this, pick this key here, and then make this a little bit smoother, we can just pull that tangent until that foot is about where it's supposed to be. Okay? So it still feels it still feels a little low there, but right now let's just look at how smoothly that leg and ankle is coming through there. Okay, so right now we're not going to worry too much about the toe itself because we have the toe lift and the toe wiggle to further refine that. So right now if we just feel that the leg is moving pretty well, then we'll be satisfied with that for the moment. Okay, so we can do another quick play blast just to see how we feel about that. How about we play blast with this window here? Alright, let's try it again. Okay, so, oh, I'm sorry, I set the range incorrectly. We need to, when we go back to play blast our cycle, remember the range is 32 frames for a 33 frame cycle. Now we play blast that. Okay, so the way that left leg is interpolating through the cycle is definitely much better. But also what that has revealed too is that if we notice what the left leg is doing when it's on the ground is it's not moving in a smooth and even way. You'll notice when his left foot hits the ground, it goes pretty quickly, then hits a hiccup and slows down, and then speeds up again, going to the point where it's going to come off the ground. And you can see how that's sort of revealed by that funny thing his knee does near the back of his stride. So now let's go through and fix that. And this is definitely something we can use the graph editor for. So as we roll through what's going on with his left leg, we notice that his left leg is coming pretty quickly through the beginning of its cycle, and then it's sort of slowing down right there. Now in this case that's translate Z, so let's take a look at that curve and see what it's doing. Okay, now we can see it really clearly in the curve here. The steeper the curve, the faster the motion. So as his leg comes through frames 21 through 25, it's going fast, and then up to 29 it's slowing down. Now anytime you've got something that's still, i.e. a foot on the ground in the walk cycle or what have you, and then that needs to be represented by a straight line, because a straight line shows no change in speed or rotation or whatever. If he were walking in space, then that straight line would want to be flat across the graph editor because his foot is actually flat on the ground. But in the case of a walk cycle like this where he's sort of on a treadmill, all we really need to do is make sure that from the point where that foot first fully hits the ground, which in this case is 19, all the way until it lifts up off the ground, which is in this case say 29, we want to make sure that the lines of all the lines are straight between those two keys. Okay, so if we take, so really between 19 and 29 there's only one other key, so really the best thing to do is just blow it away. And now I'm sorry, there are two other keys here, 21. So now between 19 and 29, that looks like a pretty straight line, but it's not quite straight looking at the bars here, so let's just make it linear. Now we know for sure that that leg is going to move smoothly from the point it hits the ground and all the way until it comes up off the ground, and that will make for a much nice smoother walk. Okay, so now what we want to do is just look through the other aspects of this left foot and have them, generally speaking, be in a straight line through this part of the walk cycle when his foot's on the ground, and it looks like they pretty much are. This one here has come a little bit down, so that wants to be 0, just to tidy that up. And when we're going through this stage, this is where we really want to start looking at our curves and trying to take care of anything that looks kind of funny. Now this interpolation through here is not exactly nice and smooth, so we'll want to just sort of do something kind of like that and then go to the other side. And what we can also do here is go curves pre-infinity cycle, so then that way when we're adjusting the curves on this side we can see how it looks coming in as well. So that curve's now a little prettier. So now when we open the range up a little bit more and look how it interpolates, we can see that it looks pretty smooth through there. Now the reason his foot is coming out of the box here is because of the toe lift and the toe wiggle. The wiggle is the toe itself, and the lift is the way the ankle comes off of his toe. So the animation of the foot itself is going to stay where that box is, but then once we do the toe lift, that pulls his leg out of that box. So what we really want to see when we cycle through this is a nice smooth motion of the foot itself and a nice smooth motion of that box, just to make sure that the basis of our foot animation is strong. That way whenever anything needs to change, we know that the base is strong and it's easier to make changes that are going to make sense. Okay, so now we can go in and just mess a little bit more with this toe. And what we also see too is that once again this toe is starting to come a little bit off, and then it goes down there. Okay, now at this point maybe we want that foot to be, we can either raise the foot a little bit just to put that toe right where we want it. Now we can see what that looks like on the graph. We don't really want to do anything that doesn't make sense on the graph itself. Okay, so this is 34, which is 1 which is the same as frame 1. So if we want to raise the foot that way, instead of placing a new key on 34, what we want to do is, I'm sorry, that's frame 2. What we want to do is just raise 2 a little bit. Maybe the better, simpler way to do that is by raising this tangent. That's going to lift that foot up there a little bit. To make it so that there's not as many keys there. But what that's done is that's messed up this tangent here. So maybe an even better approach would be, if we want to make sure this thing interpolates smoothly, maybe the best thing to do is to select that key, shift select this key, and then shift raise them both. So then that way we get a really nice smooth curve all the way through there. We can mess with this tangent a little bit, mess with this tangent a little bit, and now we can see that that's a pretty nice smooth curve coming up through there. So now we can just roll through it and see how that looks. Okay, so it looks like it's maybe lifted up a little high. So now we can just grab them both like this, lower it a hair, oops, I'm sorry, lower it a hair with the shift button, and now move both of these tangents at the same time to make that smooth. And it looks like we've got something pretty good. It still feels like at this point coming through 35, which is frame 3, that foot is still a little low. And so I really don't want to mess with the translate Y anymore, because it's pretty good. Let's try to address this now with the toe wiggle. We can just make this line a little prettier if we want. There we go. Okay, so now the toe wiggle itself, let's take a look at what that curve is doing. Okay, so now with this, there's by changing that we've set a key here because we're on auto key, so we can delete that. And now the first thing we want to do is flatten both of these. So now when we go through, we see that that toe wiggle looks pretty good, but that now right at this point, 35, which I believe is frame 3, this is where we really want that wiggle to be cranked up a little more. So we can just middle mouse drag it until we really get that feeling of bend there. And then now we notice it's come up a little bit, so this may be a rotate X thing. So yeah, if we look here, we're at -2, which is 31, and we see it's still a little high off the ground. So if we raise this a bit, that's going to bring that down to where it's a little more in contact with the ground. Now we've got a nice, pretty solid, raise this a bit, pretty solid interpolation through there, which kind of makes sense. Okay, and now we just want to bring this key up here to match this one. All right, so it's still coming down a little too low there. So let's see what we can do about that. Okay, so we're going through this here, and we notice that foot comes down a little bit too low there, and I think that's because this curve here on the rotate X is starting to crank up a little too quickly. So what we can do is find its equivalent earlier in the cycle, which is frame 2. We can set a key there, and we can lower the key so the foot comes up a bit, and that gives us what appears to be a pretty good run through that cycle. So let's go back up here and just see how it looks. Okay, that looks a little better, so why don't we play blast that, see how it looks. Because that looks nice and smooth. Alright, so there we have what feels to be a pretty good left leg. It's coming down smoothly off of on the step. There's no knee pop on that left leg, and then as it comes back off the ground, it's got a nice smooth raise, and we can really see how his weight is sitting on that toe. Okay, so now since we feel pretty good about that, what we can do now is match the right leg to the left leg so that it looks exactly symmetrical, because on a good walk cycle the symmetry is always there unless the character has a limp. And so of course the way we do that is we select this left foot, and then we shift select the right foot. And now what we want to do is just go through one by one. It's just like when we were keying. We'll select translate F on the left foot. This is the one. The left foot is our template. We know it's good. So the translate Z on the left is good. We're going to control shift translate Z on the right foot. And it should be something pretty close to opposite. And now all we're going to do is go through these keys on the right to make them exactly the same but opposite on the left.